Just going to make sure Bonnie's ready with the slides. Yes. Do you know who this is? Mozart. Yes. Good. How about this next one? Is that also Mozart? How about this? Is Mozart's dog. Pardon? Haydn. Okay, yeah. I now know your opinion of Haydn. When we were in Salzburg several years ago, we saw Mozarts everywhere. Young Mozarts, old Mozarts, every skin color of Mozart, woman Mozart, man Mozarts, and they were all there selling tickets to concerts or taking money if you could have your photo taken with them. They were everywhere. And so, what about this next picture? Who's this? Good answer. I'm surprised it wasn't more enthusiastic from the whole congregation. How about this next one? Who's that? They're very different pictures, aren't they? But I think in some ways, no matter what we do, it's recognizable. Because with Mozart, if it's a white powdered wig and a red jacket, that must be Mozart. With Jesus, if it's a guy with long hair and a beard wearing a white robe, that must be Jesus. For a very long time, we have pondered who this person is. And we've often used art and images to figure out who Jesus was. And it's completely natural that we would do this because we're Christians. We want to take this person on as a guide. And if we get a picture of who he was, then it makes a relationship a little bit easier. And I would imagine that of everybody here, everybody probably has a slightly different image of who Jesus was, in appearance, in personality, in what he lived for, and why he came to be with us. Our reading today is one where Jesus himself seems to be wondering who he is. This reading is from Matthew 26. Now, when Jesus came to the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Now, this is one of those readings that has some cultural subtleties that are pretty easy to miss. And one of the reasons for that is that, like it or not, we live in a highly, highly individualistic society. We are all self-made people. We praise people for being independent and pulling themselves up by the so-called bootstraps. We make for ourselves who we wish to be. This is completely unlike the culture of Jesus, which was essentially collectivist, communal. The idea of a self-made person would not only be foreign to them, but it would be offensive. Because you don't get to determine who you are as a person. Those decisions are made up by your community. First of all, It's established by the conditions of your birth, the family that you are born into. Because it is your father and your father's father and going back into your ancestry that determine largely what your honor will be in a society. This is why the genealogy stories of Jesus going all the way back to King David and the miraculous stories of the conditions of Jesus' birth were so important to the early Christians, because they were establishing Jesus' honor even before Jesus ever said a word. Now, you can augment this level of honor that you have in society by some of the ways that you act, how you live, and like if you are going to be a good and honest and hardworking person that takes care of your family, those are all things that are going to raise your honor in society. But to go to a new town and introduce yourself as a good and honorable person, if you were to self-inflate your own status, your community would be there to pop your balloon. So when Jesus goes to his disciples and asks, "Who do people say that I am?" he's not asking about rumors. He's not asking about opinions. He's actually asking about his very own identity. Because Jesus, too, does not get to say who he is. It is up to his community to say who he is. And so the feedback from his friends saying, "You are the Messiah," is crucially important. Now, Jesus' response to this is kind of interesting. Peter comes and says, "Yes, you're the Messiah, the Son of God." And at first, Jesus praises him, says that his church is going to be built on the foundation of Peter. He's going to be the rock. But then he goes on to say, "Please don't tell anybody else that that's who I am." And I wonder why that is. I think some of it might be that he's just trying to avoid misunderstanding. The promise of a Messiah to come to earth, to bring salvation and honor back to the people of Israel has been long talked about. But the Messiah was really meant to be a great military leader, somebody that was going to be there to vanquish all of Israel's enemies and to kick out anybody that didn't belong. And that's really not who Jesus was. He was certainly against the Roman occupation, but he was very much a person involved in passive resistance. He was not a violent, militaristic person. He may have also not wanted to spread this title of Messiah around. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus will often say things like, "It is not yet time," as in not yet time for him to be arrested. And what it could be is that, imagine that you are the military leaders, you are the Roman occupation. Talk of a Messiah, a person who's going to overthrow them and kick them out, could get you into a great deal of trouble. This is a treasonous title, and so Jesus may be wanting to avoid this. But if Jesus were to come to you and say, "Who do you say that I am?" what would you say? Artists throughout the centuries since Jesus' time have tried to tackle this question. Let's see that first slide so I remember where I'm going with this. That one. Let's move on to the next one. Yeah, sometimes the artists have tried to reveal something theological about Jesus. Now, when you look at this one, this picture at first glance might seem a little off. Maybe it looks like the artist really actually wasn't all that good. The two sides of his face don't match. But that's actually intentional. The artist did this to remind us of the dual nature of Jesus, fully human but fully divine. In the next picture, we have the birth of Jesus and the shepherds all gathered around. But you'll notice down at the bottom, there's a lamb whose legs are already trussed, as if that lamb is already ready for slaughter. This is a really common theme in a lot of classic art when you have a depiction of Jesus' birth, that somewhere in there is going to be a lamb, sometimes even carrying a cross. And this is a reminder that Jesus is to be the sacrificial lamb to take away the sins of the people. How do these kind of images feel to you? Does that feel familiar? Does that set you at ease or maybe dis-ease? Sometimes, in the next one, we'll see that Jesus is sometimes used as an instrument of the empire. In the 3rd century, Constantine decided that the Roman Empire was going to be Christian because he wanted the dedication and the zealousness of these Christians to be on the side of the empire instead of opposing the empire. And so we have, all of a sudden, a Jesus of conquest. In this picture, in the center, we see the Roman emperor victorious on his horse. Underneath there are the so-called barbarians that he has trampled in his conquest. And then above there, beside two angels, is Jesus in the middle, offering his blessing to Caesar, offering a blessing for the work of conquest that Jesus is doing. Does this feel more like a Jesus that we would relate to? The Jesus that is on the side of the empire instead of opposing it like he was in his life? In this next picture, somewhere along the lines, Christian became synonymous with European. And that led to conquest of the rest of the world. They weren't just going and taking resources and trampling other cultures, they were Christianizing the world. And so Jesus went from looking like a Palestinian Jew to a Norwegian surfer. And of course, and I think some people like this because we want a Jesus that is startlingly good-looking and clean. We like the long flowing hair and of course, him being very, very white. In this next picture, you'll see this is a picture that was done by an artist and anthropologist looking at what the typical person in Jesus' day would have looked like. This is far more likely a picture of who Jesus may have appeared to be. But when we look at these two pictures side by side, which do you like? Do you like the Hollywoodized Jesus, or do you like the Jesus that would likely get arrested by ICE agents and thrown into a concentration camp? At the very least, this Jesus is going to have to go through a lot of extra airport security. What about this next one? Oh, yes. I want to say a little bit about this first. Whenever we think about Jesus, as I said at the beginning, it is actually really wonderful that we have an image of Jesus in our minds. It helps us with our relationship. It helps us if we're thinking about, praying to, reading about. It helps us to have an idea in our head about who this person was and what they looked like. But I think what's really important is that we always try to remember that this is an incomplete picture. It is a metaphor of reality. Because when we forget that this is a metaphor, and this is the same with everything having to do with religion, metaphor is our language, but when we forget that we're talking in metaphors and it becomes reality, then we claim God, Jesus, our faith, exclusively as our own. We are the only ones then that hold the real truth, and every other opinion, every other culture, every other expression of religion then becomes inferior. Then it becomes something either to be done away with or fixed. So, in this picture, one of the things I love about this picture is that Jesus' face is unseen. The only reason that we can see who Jesus is in this photo is from the halo that is emanating from the one, but illuminating everybody else. This painting is called Jesus of the Bread Line. And this is Jesus bringing good news to the poor in person, in solidarity, standing with the poorest of the poor, waiting for their daily bread. Is this more like the Jesus that you imagine? This next one is one of my favorites. This artist, this is a Catholic priest and artist. I have to remember his name. His name is Seger Koder, German artist. And he depicts Jesus and his disciples in all of his paintings in very ordinary situations. And even the disciples and Jesus themselves, they're depicted in ordinary ways. Not finely dressed, not flowing robes and clean hair. It's just everyday people in everyday situations. The picture of Jesus gathered at the Last Supper isn't some great grand banquet, but a whole bunch of friends gathered tightly around a very small table in a small room. In this painting, this is Jesus washing Peter's feet. And in here, you can see that Peter actually looks kind of concerned, almost like he's trying to push Jesus away. You can see that even Jesus' own feet could use a cleaning. He's been walking his path in sandals, getting his feet wet. But one of the things I love about this painting and all of his paintings is he never depicts Jesus' face head on. You can sometimes kind of see a glimpse of who Jesus is. If you look carefully into the bowl of water, you can see a reflection. And I love that too. He does these reflections quite often in a body of water, in a cup, in a bowl. It's a reminder that none of our images of Jesus are quite right. They're all obscured. But also in this, he's inviting you that when you look at this photo, you may be seeing a slight reflection of yourself as well. A reflection of the indwelling Christ that lives within each of our hearts. The indwelling Christ that invites us to bring good news for the poor, to help a friend in need, to be a servant, to be the person who is waiting for someone to bring good news. When Jesus asks you, "Who do you say that I am?" he is also asking you, "Who do you say that you are?"